I was just sharing on Facebook. I try to do a little live stream on Facebook before we actually go on air. And I was just sharing with the people who are listening or watching there. There's no way you can avoid this. It's just one of those stories that even though it happened nowhere near here and there's no loss of human life, there's a media storm about this gorilla. You could call it a gorilla monsoon. Ah! Sorry, I'll try not to engage in too much of that. This gorilla that was killed in Cincinnati at a zoo over the weekend. I guess it was over the weekend, right? It must have been Saturday. And now you have a number of people who are upset because they say the gorilla was trying to help the little boy. Well, it may have been trying to help the little boy, dragging him all over the water at the bottom of the gorilla exhibit. Gorillas drag their own young around sometimes like that, and people say, well, it was the screaming and the shouting coming from the people that the gorilla got panicked and dragged the kid away, thinking he had to protect the kid from all of these screaming people up at the top of the exhibit. And this morning, before I got into work, I was watching some television news, and wouldn't you know it, it dominated television news. With so many things going on around this world, every time we have one of these situations, I saw a comment yesterday from a guy on Facebook. He said, first it was the lion in Africa, now it's the gorilla at the zoo, but no one lifts a finger over 2 million babies a year being aborted in this country. A wonderful thought that he had, but I'm sure that a lot of your liberal friends out there, they're much more concerned. They would have liked to have seen the little boy probably thrashed and smashed against the wall in order to save the gorilla. It's mind-boggling that I was watching Fox and Friends early, not Fox and Friends per se, but they have this program that comes on before the regular Fox and Friends with all the cooking and boy bands that takes place, and they call that news. I don't know why, but they call that news. Apparently, they're trying to attract a large audience of people out there who, well, I'll talk about this a little bit later. Mark Dice, the fellow who does all of these YouTube videos, where he goes around the country asking people questions about current events or politics or constitutional issues. He went to a beach in San Diego over the weekend and asked people what Memorial Day was all about. Wait till you hear what the illiterates, the functional illiterates, had to say in speaking with him. I'll share that in the next hour of the program. But these TV networks are trying to, even in newscasts, they're trying to bring in the dumbest people as well, because the dumbest people do buy products that are sold during the course of their shows. But before the actual Fox and Friends comes on, there's an earlier Fox and Friends where you've got these two blonde babes with long legs and rather, well, they fill a blouse. I'll put it that way. And they were saying that people are enraged about this whole gorilla thing. In fact, they said even celebrities are tweeting and weighing in. Yeah. And I'm supposed to be upset because a celebrity is upset about it all? Well, they can sing or read a prompter, or they can sometimes even act. Yeah, it doesn't mean they have anything going on between their ears otherwise. So that was brought up. And, of course, we had a similar situation in Yellowstone a few weeks ago, and I think the one at Yellowstone, at least, there was a better argument for saving the little buffalo, or bison as it's technically called, that perhaps could have gone off and lived, give it to someone who might have been able to take care of it at a pen in the backyard. But you had a couple of nitwit tourists, they were likely from Europe, who came to this country and decided that this buffalo was cold because they saw it standing outside. So they threw it into their truck, and unfortunately, it was rejected by the herd, and it was then had to be put down according to the people who run the park. And there was a discussion there: should it have been put down, or should it have gone to somebody's house, been put in a pen out back? And that I thought was a legitimate argument. But shooting the gorilla dead, I've got no problem with that. I'm sad it happened, but I've got no problem with that, because the little boy's life, we don't know what the gorilla was going to do. The little boy's life, I thought, was more important. But if you're a liberal out there, you don't. It's you're just blinded to the fact that they don't believe that the children in a womb are human beings. Why would they think that a 4-year-old boy was a human being? 736-0300, 736-0300. Bill Colley with you this morning on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. It's 55, and you're up next. You're on the air.
Morning, Bill. This emergency zoo response team, that sounds like something that Idaho should immediately just jump on. SWAT teams armed and ready to go at a moment's notice to these zoos. So that's very, very serious.
Well, it is. You got tigers with great big teeth, and you got lions with great big teeth, and you got gorillas that weigh 400 or 500 pounds tossing little kids around like rag dolls. What are they supposed to do? Stand there and say, I wonder what's going to happen next in this situation. Tell you what, let's take some bets. Let's see if he crushes his skull or not. I got 5-1 odds. The fact that they actually have a rapid response team makes sense to me. You've got wild animals there, for crying out loud. And if you've got wild animals around people, it's like those nitwits on the golf course in Florida. You got a 15-foot alligator walking across the golf course, and they're all running out there with their cell phones to get pictures of it. Now, I have seen, I went to an alligator farm in Florida when I was about 11 or 12 years old. And you know what? They are actually very fast critters. They can really, when they're lumbering across the golf course, they look dumb and slow. But if you get them angry, they can really motor. I remember we were at an alligator farm, and there was just a fence that was separating us from them. And some little boy came running up, blah, and this alligator took off like a rocket. Now, he couldn't get to the little boy, but, you're talking quickness. So, yeah, you would want someone around who might be able to go out there with a rifle and be a very good dead-eye shot to take care of one of these critters if they did indeed threaten a human being. Now, I point out, are there bigger stories in the world? Sure. But this is a consultant-driven business, and this is what it seems a lot of people are talking about today, and so I just wanted to at least touch on it at the beginning of our show. I got a couple of thoughts about it. This is Thane Maynard. He's the zookeeper. Well, they call him the director or curator or whatever. And he explains that, it wasn't something they wanted to do, but you can't stand by. What would have happened? And this was the question I heard asked this morning on one of the TV shows I was watching. What would happen if they'd stood by and let the little kid get snapped in half?
It is a big loss to the Cincinnati Zoo. Harambe was one of our most magnificent animals. He's a critically endangered species. We're one of the key players in gorilla captive breeding and conservation, and so it's a big loss.
It is a big loss. And yet you got these women who are standing outside with all of these signs saying, oh, this is a terrible thing. It should have never been done. And yet most of those women who, if you walked up and said to them, are you pro-life or pro-choice? They would say, I'm pro-choice. Nobody's going to tell me what to do when it comes to murdering my own children. You're up next. You're on the air with Bill Colley on Top Story.
This story makes me sick, and I read about it this weekend too. And I have 4 younger sons, and they watch these cartoons all the time with animals in them, where it seems like all we do is humanize animals all the time. And I think it makes our culture stupid, especially inner city people. They don't realize that those are wild animals. They will kill you if they get close to you.
They certainly will.
They're not human beings. They don't have sympathy for us. Just like the Bible says, there's enmity between animal and man, and that's there for a reason. I just think these people are crazy.
Thank you very much for weighing in on that. Many years ago, when I was just a young fellow, I had to cover a story where the Onondaga Indian tribe had been gifted a herd of bison by one of their western tribes that they were close to. And the bison, though, had a habit of breaking out, and they would wander out onto an interstate highway and block traffic. And I remember interviewing the local sheriff at the time, and he said to me, okay, the serious problem for us is not that they're necessarily in the road, because he said, we can block the road off, make people get off at the other exits. He said, we've got people out there, though, who want to go up and commune with them. And then he said to me, I'll never forget this. He said, you know how many people are killed every year trying to, befriend my friend the buffalo out in Yellowstone? And now that I live in this part of the world, I know what he was talking about. But stay away. It's like if you're encountering wolves or grizzly bears or the like, they may look warm and fuzzy, and you may have had a teddy bear when you were a kid, but your teddy bear wasn't capable of ripping your head off. You're up next. You're on the air with Bill Colley on KLIX.
Yeah, morning, Bill. About a year ago, over in Burley, there was a story about the people that stole the little miniature donkey and drug it down the road, and they wound up having to euthanize it. And they set up a GoFundMe page, and it raised like $35,000. And at this exact same time, probably about the same date, a woman was murdered over there in Burley, and it was a really tragic murder. And they set up a GoFundMe page, and it raised about $300. It's insanity. We've lost our minds in this country on our priorities.
I would agree with that. Obviously, a woman's life is much more valuable than a donkey's life, or a bear's life, or a gorilla's life, or a bison's life, and yet, sure, the gorilla, and again, I saw the video, and it may well be, I would agree, maybe the gorilla meant the kid no harm, maybe the gorilla was looking to protect the kid, but you don't know, because we don't know what's going through that ape's mind in that situation. And even while he was trying to protect the kid, the way he was dragging the kid around and just bouncing him off the walls, at some point might not have been good for the little boy. Having raised a child myself, I think that if I was dragging her around like that, she could have been at least bruised, if nothing else, and maybe worse. You're up next. You're on the air at 8:17 on KLIX.
Yes. I definitely agree that a human's life is more important than animals. But like the gentleman was saying about where they was dragging the donkey, animals can't defend themselves in, well, yes, the wild, like bears, gorillas, lions, and certainly they can. But an innocent little donkey been drugged down the road, not to say it's more serious than a human life, but I think it's very serious that some ignorant blank would do that. And I think there should be serious consequences. But a human can defend themselves in most situations. And so that's what I have to say. Thank you for taking my call.
Sure, thank you. Well, over the weekend, a friend of mine shared a video with me. These girls in Florida, teenage girls, they took a little bunny rabbit, and they made a video of themselves grabbing the rabbit and smashing it against a wall repeatedly. Then they posted the video. Ha, 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 aren't we clever and funny? Ha, ha, ha. Well, they're all in jail now at some juvenile detention center. The rabbit suffered, luckily, just a broken leg. That's not good, but hey, it could have been far worse. And the rabbit is being taken care of. I have a solution for people who torture animals. This is entirely different than what happened in Cincinnati, where they had to do something. But if you see someone doing that to a rabbit or a donkey or a cat or anything else like that, then I think, with the little girls are only 13 and 14 years old. I don't care. They're going to spend the next year of their life working on a chain gang every day, 365 consecutive days, no matter what the weather is. You're going to chain them together. You're going to give them a shovel, and they're going to clean out ditches. And if mom and dad complain, then mom and dad are going to join them too as well. And I'll tell you what, we get to May 31st next year, those little, I must question their parentage and their legitimacy, those bad kids, I'll tell you what, come May 31st next year, they'll have a whole different outlook on life. And they'll walk the straight and narrow at that point. Because you see depravity of this sort, give them something to do over the next year that reminds them that life can be a little tough for them too as well. And maybe perhaps a little discipline returned into their structure, if you will. They've got to get up at 5 o'clock every morning and be digging ditches at 6. And whether it rains or snows, or let them know that, life isn't always kind. And they were unkind as well. Let them share in that just a little bit. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com. It's 55. Steve Millington from the Twin Falls County Republican Party is on the way shortly.